And our next story is about the Quad, the Quadrilateral Security Dialogue. Next week, the Quad summit was to take place in Sydney. But things have changed over the last 24 hours. Have a look at this headline. Australia has cancelled the Quad summit. Why? Because US President Joe Biden has pulled out. On Tuesday night, he called off his scheduled visit to Australia. In fact, he has also cancelled his visit to Papua New Guinea. Why? To deal with domestic issues related to the debt ceiling. Now, at least that is what the American media is saying at this point. In any case, Biden's withdrawal from the summit has made Australia drop the entire meeting. The announcement was made by the Australian Prime Minister himself, Anthony Albanese. So what happens now is the immediate question. The Australian Prime Minister saying the meeting will now be held in Hiroshima. Remember, Quad leaders will be at the G7 in Hiroshima over the weekend, and reports say Australia is attempting to organize a Quad summit on its sidelines. But the question here is, what led to this dramatic turn of events? And why did the American president have to postpone his visit at the very last moment? Is it really because of the storm over the debt ceiling back home? Or is there more than what meets the eye? Let's try to find out. And to start with, what is the debt ceiling issue really all about? To understand that, we'll have to understand what a debt ceiling is. It's simply the limit placed by the US Congress on the amount of debt that the government can accrue. In other words, it's the maximum amount of money which the Congress allows the federal government to cover its bills. And this is needed because the government generally spends more money than it collects in taxes. So it must take out debt to pay its expenses. And this mechanism was created during the First World War to simplify borrowing. According to reports, the US Congress has lifted the debt limit 78 times since 1960. The debt ceiling was last raised in December 2021 by $2.5 trillion. And that said, over the years, both Republicans and Democrats have used the debt ceiling as a way to force the hands of the president. And that's exactly what's happening right now, by the way. The Biden administration wants to raise the US debt ceiling again. The Democrats are pushing for it, and the Republicans are against it. In fact, they have a majority in the House, so they have refused to raise the debt ceiling until Biden and Democrats agree to reduce spending. And last we checked, emergency talks were held at the White House to end the stalemate and get the debt ceiling raised. The Democrats are hopeful that the two sides may reach consensus soon. But what if that consensus is not arrived at? What if the debt ceiling is not raised? Well, it could lead to the first ever US default. In fact, the country's Treasury Secretary has already warned that the US government may run out of money to pay its obligations as early as the 1st of June, which, by the way, is the deadline to raise the debt ceiling. And what will happen if the US defaults? Well, it could spark a constitutional crisis that could further unleash an economic and financial catastrophe. If you just try to quantify this crisis, America's gross domestic product could drop 4% and over 7 million workers could lose their jobs, 7 million. In fact, even a brief default could lead to the loss of 2 million jobs. This is according to projections by Moody's Analytics. And then we have the Brookings Institution. It says a default could lead to $750 billion in higher federal borrowing costs over the next decade. Now, just to put this simply, a debt default could harm America's global leadership position and also raise questions about its ability to defend its national security interests. And this is something that America cannot afford right now. Absolutely not. Given how China and Russia could try and take advantage of this on the world stage, and embarrass Washington? So is there a way out of this? Yes, there is. Like I said, for this crisis to be resolved, the Republicans and the Democrats will have to strike a compromise, which so far seems unlikely. And here's hoping that they are able to resolve their differences. But at the same time, we cannot help but wonder if this debt ceiling was such a big issue, to the extent that Biden had to cancel his visit to Australia. I ask this because he is going to Japan to attend the G7, but not to Australia and Papua New Guinea. We understand the G7 is a big forum, but the Quad also holds significant importance, to say the least, given America's differences with China. My point is simple. How does it make sense to skip one international commitment but attend another? And how does it make sense to prioritize one forum over another? Why not cancel both the visits if the crisis back at home is so overwhelming? The White House clearly has a lot of questions to answer. WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the updates on the move.